Well, the wildcard round is gone, and now here comes what they say is the best weekend in all of football, if not all of sports, the divisional round of the playoffs. Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Glenn Steve. I'm back with another YouTube video here to preview the divisional round of the playoffs. We had the wild card last week. What a weekend it was. I was okay in my picks. I went 3-2. You had the Rams beating the Panthers on Saturday. So I started off high. I was 2-0. Rams beat the Panthers, and then you had the Bears coming back in a wild game to beat the Packers. I don't know how they pulled it out, but they did. And then, Sunday, didn't have the best of luck. I actually went 0-3 in my picks, but I was close. So I'll take what I can get. You had the Bills come from behind to beat the Jaguars. That was kind of a back and forth game. Had four fourth quarter lead changes in that game. Great game there. And then you had the 49ers and the Eagles. I took the Eagles just off the strength that they're the defending champions. But the 49ers, they showed more grit in that game. Came out with the victory. Got a little bit of revenge on the Eagles for that championship game, the NFC championship game a couple years ago. And then you had the Patriots and Chargers. That was kind of more of a slog, more of a defensive battle sort of game. The Chargers played pretty well on defense, but they just couldn't get anything going on offense. Surprisingly, against the Patriots team, yes, they were playing at home, but they weren't the best defensive team this year. So I figured the Chargers would be able to do something, but they weren't able to do anything. Only scored 3 points. Patriots pulled that one out. And then the Monday Night Football game, for a while, was a struggle with the Texans and the Steelers, but the Texans ended up coming through in that second half and really just ended up smashing the Steelers. So I was 3-2 in my picks. Let's see how I do this week. It's only 4 games, so it's not going to be an odd number of, whether you win or lose. It's going to be kind of I do well or I don't. So like last week, we're going to start with the order that the games will be played in. Of course, you got 2 in the AFC, 2 in the NFC, 2 on Saturday, and 2 on Sunday. So we'll first start with the AFC divisional game, that being the 6th seed, the Buffalo Bills, traveling all the way west to play the 1 seed, that being the Denver Broncos. So first of all, this is a rematch of the AFC wildcard game from last year, where the Bills hosted the Broncos and they blew them out 31-7. For obvious reasons, I don't think it's going to be that way this time around. Obviously, Denver's a much better team. Buffalo, I don't know if they're better or not than they were last year. They had some good indicators in last week's game against Jacksonville, but it's hard for me to say they're the better team. Record-wise, obviously they're worse. The Broncos had one of the best records in the league. Actually, they were tied with Seattle for the best record, so there's that. And, playing in that mile-high altitude and that crowd over there in Denver, it's going to be very loud. It's the first time in a while that they've hosted a playoff game. I believe the last time they did was the last time they went to the Super Bowl. When they played the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. That was 2014, 2015. So long time ago. So that crowd's going to be itching. They're going to be ready to root on their Broncos for victory. Obviously they have a great defense, but they're going up against an MVP caliber player. He's the defending MVP in Josh Allen, who a lot of people have said, a lot of people put pressure on for him to have a historic run now that you got the Patrick Mahomes and the Lamar Jacksons and the Joe Burrows. All those guys are out of the playoffs. So now you're the one, obviously in the AFC, that's the best one, clearly, and the best, and the one with the most experience. You gotta get it done, and it's gonna be on the road to do it. It's gonna be tough, but he's up to the challenge if last week was any indicator, because he got banged up a couple of times in that Jaguars game, and he still came through, led his team to victory. Now, a couple of things that do concern me on Denver's side of the ball is one, the fact that Bo Nix is actually 1-8 against teams that score 17 or more points. So that tells me if it's going to get to a shootout and Josh Allen starts off hot and the Bills start off hot, are the Broncos going to have enough offense to be able to respond? Because obviously their strength is their defense. And then number 2 is their rushing game. The Bills don't have the greatest of rush defenses, and even last week, Jacksonville was able to exploit that. Is Denver going to be able to do the same? They're going to have to be able to control the game, especially if they get off to a hot lead early on, because otherwise, I can see this being a back and forth game. The Bills are, I think the odds are Bills minus 1.5. So this is pretty much a pick 'em game, and that's about right. So yes, Denver's gonna have to, I think their offense is really gonna have to show up and show out. They're gonna win this game. Now, as far as Buffalo goes, they're gonna need a great blocking performance from their offensive line against that ferocious Denver defense. And, Josh Allen, one of those receivers are going to have to step up for the tight ends. Somebody to help Josh Allen out in the passing game, because that's going to be their focus is Josh Allen. He's, to Denver, probably going to be their biggest threat. Running the ball, passing the ball, just willing his team to victory like he did last week. So, and then, they got a great running game with James Cook, who I believe is the NFL's leading rusher in the regular season. So they have that going for them, obviously, in Josh Allen. So that's going to be their focus, is stopping the run. They're going to need somebody, whether it's a receiver, tight end, to step up in that passing game to help alleviate some of that pressure as far as Buffalo goes on offense. And speaking of Buffalo, that's who I got winning this game. I think this is going to be no more than a 6-point spread. It's not going to be any more than a touchdown game. I don't know if it's going to be that high scoring. If it is, that definitely favors Buffalo, in my opinion. But I like these lower seeded teams that are on heaters, that have, great players. That's what Buffalo has, because those great players are able to make the difference in small, tight little games like this. And obviously Buffalo really is the only veteran team left in the AFC. The other three, Denver, Houston, New England, are younger teams. So that can play to their advantage as well, is the fact that they have experience and they have the best overall player. Hard to pick against that, so I'm going to go with Buffalo. So then that brings us to the second game happening tonight on Fox, and that will be the NFC West rubber match between the San Francisco 49ers, the 6th seed, and the top seeded in the NFC, that being the Seattle Seahawks. Now, while sure, San Francisco did go up to Seattle and beat them, that was back in week 1, number 1, and number 2, that was a 17-13 game. And then Seattle just beat them really just a couple weeks ago, back in week 18 over in Santa Clara. They won 13-3. So one thing this game is going to tell me is there's probably not going to be a lot of points scored. Color me surprised if they do. I just don't think that's going to happen. It's going to be a low-scoring, slogging game, just like everybody predicts. Two physical teams, even though San Francisco's not the defense that they used to be. Can't say the same for Seattle. That's really the strength of their team, is their defense. They have capable pieces, both sides do, on offense, but I think defense rules the day in this matchup anyway. I would say offense rules the day for San Francisco, but just in this matchup, there's something about it. It's going to be a low-scoring physical game. And also, we got to factor in that this is the first time since 2020 that wild crowd up there in Seattle has hosted a playoff game. So that 12th man, that thing's going to be rocking like no other, especially for the 49ers, a team that they've had history with in the regular season and the playoffs, and a team that they hate. So that crowd in Seattle's going to be rocking. The weather's not going to be great. The weather's not going to be great for any of these games. Spoiler alert. You're talking about a game in Denver, Colorado, Seattle, Washington, Foxborough, Massachusetts, in the Boston area, and then Chicago, Illinois in January. So it's going to be ugly weather for all these games. I think the projected temperature is going to be around 40 degrees. I wouldn't be surprised if it rains. It's Seattle. So those are things that we got to keep in mind as well. However, I think some injuries have ravaged the 49ers, and so all in all, I know it's their ultimate goal to be able to play the Super Bowl in their home stadium and be, I think, just the third team to do that. But this is like the toughest test I think they'll have to run into should they get past this team. I'm saying they don't. I think Seattle does win this game. I think they're going to kind of be conservative, thinking a little bit on offense, but I think they're just going to do just enough to really pull this game out. It's going to be a close game, low-scoring game, like I said, but I think that's just a little bit too much for the 49ers to overcome. I do think the Seahawks do pull this one out. I'll say by a field goal, maybe like 4 points, something like that. All right, guys, so the third game that we have on tap, and the first one on Sunday, is going to be the 5 seed, the Houston Texans, going all the way up north, again, to face the 2 seeded New England Patriots. So in this game, you got a hot Houston Texans team that, again, like I said, didn't really play all that great on offense and still mustered to score 30 points, and they just dominated Pittsburgh, especially in that second half, and they won 30-6 up there in Pittsburgh. That's 3 turnovers, and that's despite 3 turnovers on offense. CJ Stroud, I think he fumbled the ball like 5 times and lost it twice. Crazy stats, but they were still able to, despite that, really have a pretty decent game passing the ball. And they were able to run the ball on Pittsburgh, and then that defense just absolutely dominant. That was their 10th win in a row, including the regular season. That being said, there's just a couple things that are working against the Texans' favor, and that is, number 1, their best receiver and probably their best offensive player, that being Nico Collins, had the concussion last week, and he has not been cleared to play, so he will not play in Sunday's game versus New England. And then the second thing that the Texans have going against them is really the playoff history, and that being that they're the only NFL franchise that has never been to a conference championship game ever. They've been around since 2002. They've been to the divisional round a bunch of times, and each time they have fell short. And they're 0-2 against the Patriots all time. Now, obviously, that was with Tom Brady and the Patriots crew, Bill Belichick being the head coach. A little bit different feel to the Patriots this time around. They're a younger team like the Texans, so they don't have the mystique, I don't think, that they used to have, but still, that's something that has to be in the back of their minds, at least just a little bit. Obviously, and then on top of that, one weather team going out to play a cold weather team. Now, obviously, they beat Pittsburgh last week, but they're going to be against the Patriots. I think the temperature is supposed to be in the low 30s. I think the wind chill is going to be in the 20s, and they say it could snow. So that's not a team that has much experience playing in weather like that. So we'll see how that affects them as well. Now, when you look at the New England side of things, the star of the show is the offense. Drake May, who I think is going to be the runner-up to MVP this year, to Matt Stafford, who I think is going to be the MVP. Great year by him in his second year. He's proven himself to be the franchise cornerstone to lead them into the future, and they seem to have their head coach. And if you have your head coach and your quarterback set, your team's going to be set for a long time as long as the quarterback's healthy. So they got a really good thing going on in New England yet again. And they got a pretty good offense to back them up as well. They're mostly more of a passing team, and they got some good weapons on the outside. And then their defense doesn't really get the credit they deserve. I wouldn't say that they're a bad defense. Some people try to make it seem like the defense is just bad and mediocre. They're pretty good. So they can hold serve as well. And they got some good players, good young players on that side of the ball too. But they're not very experienced. Now, they're going against a team that's also not very experienced, so there's that. So I don't think that's really going to be as huge of a factor. So that might actually help New England. But that being said, it is obvious that offensive line is going to have a handful on their hands like no other that they've had. They have not seen a defense like this all year. So we're going to see how they handle that. That's probably going to be the negative side of things for the Patriots. But one other thing that's positive is they do have some players that have cleared protocol as far as injury goes, and they will be able to play on Sunday. So that's going to be big. You got Nico Collins out, but you got guys like Christian Gonzalez, one of their cornerbacks. He's going to play. He's cleared concussion protocol, so that's a big thing for the Patriots. As far as who's going to win this game, I've been back and forth on it. I'll be more confident in the Texans if Nico Collins were to play. Even so, I will stick with Houston. I just think if this game is, like I said, bad weather games, you typically don't see a lot of high-scoring games in bad weather games. But if it does get to that point, then definitely New England is going to win this game. Should this be a lower-scoring slog type of a game, I think the Texans have the running game, and I think they have just enough with their quarterback. Even though he does make some mistakes, he can make all the throws. So if they can do that on offense and hold serve, that defense is going to be able to keep the Patriots, I believe, at bay. So give me the Texans in yet a close game. Might be a little bit more low scoring. That's how they're going to win it. If they're going to win, that's what I think is going to happen. So I will roll with the Texans in yet another close game. And then the last game on tap for Sunday is the second NFC Divisional Round game between the 5 seed, the Los Angeles Rams, and the 2 seed, that being the Chicago Bears. Now, this game is going to be more of a high-powered offensive sort of game, even though obviously both teams have capable players on defense as well. But these are two teams I think they're led more so by their offensive prowess. With the Bears, you got Ben Johnson. They got the offensive coordinator from the Lions last year, and he's played dividends for that Bears offense as well. Of course, Caleb Williams had that great comeback last week. They got receivers on the outside. They got a pretty good run game as well. So a lot of things clicking for that Chicago offense. And then you flip it to the other side. Obviously, you have what I just said earlier is the MVP favorite, that being Matt Stafford, who's just had a fantastic year. They got that high-powered offense with the running game, Kyron Williams and those guys, and then, of course, Puka Nacua and that receiving core on the outside with Devontae Adams as well. So experience on the Rams side. I think they have the edge as far as that goes. And, this is a team got to this point last year, came up just short in the divisional round. Now, I know they played, this is a warm weather team, obviously LA going to a cold weather team in Chicago. Now, last year they did it in Philadelphia, and as we know, If they had about maybe 30, 45 more seconds, maybe a minute more, probably would have won that game against the Eagles. They had them on the ropes like no other team did last year. And that was in a snowstorm, basically. And I think the weather for that game was in the low 30s, high 20s. The weather in the game for Chicago is projected to be 18 degrees. So it's definitely going to be below 20. And obviously the wind chill is going to be way below that because Chicago Stadium is pretty much right off of the lake. So I said all these games are probably not going to be very great. Weather-wise, this is most likely going to be the most brutal. Now, one other thing that should be an advantage for the Bears is the fact that the Rams don't do too well in cold weather games. Other than last year's game with the Eagles, they're 1-9 in cold weather games in the last 10. So, and obviously this is, like I said, it's going to be the coldest of them all this weekend. So we'll see how they fare with that. Obviously, you know, both these teams are offensive-minded teams, but in those type of games, and both of these teams like to pass the ball, but in both of these types of games, you got these cold weather games, these real cold weather games, those balls, you know, the footballs get hard, they get pretty slick, receivers start dropping more passes than usual and things like that. So you expect both teams to really lean more so on the running game than anything else to carry them through and get them a victory in this game. But all those things being considered, you know, the fact that the Bears were down so much last week against the Packers but came back and won it, it shows, A, how dangerous they are on offense. But if you're just going to if you're just going to remember that they were down to Green Bay to start with, and you're just going to lean on the fact that you have bad weather games as your main crutch versus how good the Bears are and how they can beat the Rams, if that's what you're leaning on, that's the best that you're giving me, then give me the Rams in this game. Of course, I was going to take them anyway. They're very good in cold weather games. I get that. History says that, but what I've seen from both teams this year, the Rams are the better team. And obviously they're on mission compared to, you know, what happened to them last year. The Bears are a younger team, still, you know, finding their footing. You know, they won that playoff game. They got to host it. It's the first one that in Chicago in a long, long time. They're going to be fired up for this one, but give me the Rams in this game. I believe they will be able to run the ball more so, and that's how they're going to get their points. And I think their defense is good enough to be able to hold against that Chicago front. So give me the Rams in this game. I'll take them by about 7, maybe 10 points. So there's my divisional round picks. Again, I have the Texans over the Patriots on Sunday, the Rams over the Bears on Sunday, and then today on Saturday, I have the Bills over the Broncos, and I got the Seahawks beating the 49ers. So we'll see how I do this week. Wasn't that great last week. It was okay last week, 3-3. Started off great, in the middle was not good, and then I ended up great on Monday night. We'll see how it goes. So let me know your picks down in the comments below. Like, share, comment, subscribe as always. And again, thank you guys for being here. Y'all could have been anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. So until next time, Quinn Steve out.